Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 10 in the Maamor Chodsheichem 5672. This is class number 3 in chapter 34 in the discourse. Class number 3 and class number 10 in the Maamor and class number 3 in the chapter 34. I want to welcome myself and everyone back to the learning. We took a little break. But the last class was uploaded more than a month ago on September 5th, and now we're already on, I see, quite a bit later, October 20th. So it's quite a bit of a break, and I want to get back. The holidays were here, Yom Tiv, this, that, a lot of things were going on, and now we want to go really up and going and keep consistent, Be'ezras Hashem. I'm sure everybody is holding right in the smack in the middle of this, and you've been holding you've frozen the thoughts of what we've learned earlier, so you're right with me. So we're holding in the middle of the chapter, actually, and the idea that we were learning, it would help to go back the last two classes if you want to refresh your memory. But over here, we're learning the idea that when the lights finally go into the vessels, that's when, in Atzilus, that's when it starts to create a Mailamata, a higher and a lower. As long as the spheros are still just pure lights, as they stand higher than Atzilus, there's no vessels yet, then the lights are all uniform. It means they're all the same. There's no higher. That means the sphere of Chachma, the sphere of Malchus, is pretty much as powerful. But when there is the lights go into vessels, then you have a whole system that in the more refined the vessel is, the more light can shine in it. So in Chachma, because the vessels are very, very refined, very, very elegant, very, very hardly a vessel, that allows for the light to be very potent and powerful. But when you go down into Bina, the vessels become more emboldened, and because the vessels are more yesh, they're more something, that forces the light to become less potent and more diminished. And so it is through all the descent, and that's what makes Chachma higher than Bina, and Bina much higher than the emotions, and the emotions much higher than Malchus, because the lower you go, the more you accentuate, the more you highlight the vessels, and therefore the lights are less. And with this, he explained in this chapter, how come we find what seems to be a contradiction, a discrepancy, that at certain times we find regarding the levels of the divine, that a higher number represents a higher level, and a lower number, which means a fewer number, represents a lower level. And at times we find the opposite, that a higher number represents a lower level, and a lesser number represents a higher level. So how do we reconcile the two? For example, he says, when it comes to the life of Sarah, it says that Sarah lived 127 years. The Torah enumerates each one separately. And the Zohar says that when it says that she lived 7 years, it's referring to that she manifested the 7 emotions, which those are single digits, the 7 emotions in her life. And when it says she lived 20 years, because she lived 127 years, Esrim Shana, it means that she was manifesting the Chachma and the Bina, the wisdom and the understanding, which are double digits. And when it says she lived 100 years, that's manifesting Keser. She reached and she was able to express and live and actualize in her life even the more transcendental lights of Keser. So do you see from here that the higher you go, the more potent and more powerful the number is? On the other hand, we find that many times the opposite. The lower you go, the more there is more, and the higher you go, there's less. For example, we learned that there is 10 spheros, right? And then if you go higher into the Ein Sof, there's no 10, it's only one. You are singular without a cheshbon. So you see that the pluralism and the many come down when more lower you go, as we discussed. And listen to this in the last classes, we discussed it at length. The answer he gave in last class, and this is what we're going to continue today, is, can you say in Yiddish, and the Chassidus, we always use that phrase, Venzich was meret. It depends what we're talking about. We're talking about two different measurement scales. Well, sometimes a higher number means simply more in quantity. More in quantity, of course, the lower you go, the more the quantity increases, because you're dealing with small pieces. You're dealing with the energies are becoming dispersed into more containers and more vessels. If you're talking from the perspective of vessels, the lower you go, the more vessels there are. And that's why Marabu Masecha Hashem, the most creatures of God are in the lowest of worlds. That's when you have the multiplicity of the most bugs, insects. For example, even in our world, you see the human who has the most content is the least from all other creatures. And animals are more than human, and plants are more than animals. And bugs within the animal kingdom itself, bugs and the mosquitoes and that, the less of the lesser quality you find, the more millions and billions of ants and whatever. So many of them, insects, but by fish and humans and birds are a little less, and animals even less. And finally, the human race has the least. And God praises the Jewish people that you are the smallest of all. You have the fewest of all. So what we're seeing is that the higher the quality of something, the fewer there is. Until there is God, there's only one, singular one. That's when we're talking about vessels. But when we're talking in terms of, when we're speaking about a higher number, but we don't mean a lot. Rather, a higher number, and over here what we are referring to is a more potent power. Like we gave the example of the difference of a type of, when you say 1,000 watts versus 100 watts in a light bulb, you're not talking about pieces, 1,000 watts. You're talking about a more powerful light that equals 1,000 watts. So, of course, on that level, the higher you go, the increased number. Okay. That now, so all this was discussed earlier, and now we continue. So again, this is in Perek Lamed Daled. I would say 2/3 down. We're going to start the last third of the chapter. The last words was a parenthesis where it says V'ayim Ashi Yisbar La'el Perek Peivav. So it fits that this we're starting to learn this year. Peivav. We just said that this is look in chapter 86. This year is the year of 86. In any case, Kamoyal Derech Marshal gives an example. When a teacher transmits intelligence Talmud to a student, so he's going to show you both things happening. A teacher teaching a student, and then the student teaching the student, and continuing the chain of dissemination of knowledge. Like, for example, what it says in Pirkei Avos that Moshe receives the Torah from God, and Moshe transmitted it to Joshua, Yeshua transmitted it to the elders transmitted it to the prophets transmitted it to the other great rabbis, the rabbis of the Mishnah, Anshe Knesset Agdola. So over there we understand that the Torah is descending, it's becoming less potent as it's descending. The Torah that Moshe received from God was far more brilliant light that Moshe was able to transmit to Joshua. But it was less wordy. Moshe's Torah was less wordy, although it was a far more potent light. Joshua's Torah, that when Joshua received the Torah from Moshe, he had much more words to it, but he had less light to it. And when Joshua gave it over to the Zekanim, Joshua had to speak more and give over more words, but the light was even less than what he had for himself. We find that when a teacher teaches to a student, the more long-winded it is, the more words there are, the less potent the powerful ideas are. The higher the student is, the less word the student needs. And of course, the teacher needs even less words. Big ideas come in small packages. A short, one little phrase contains this massive idea. But when you want to break it down to students, you have to put a lot of words. And to the more inferior the student is, the more words you need and examples you need. And that is, however, weakening the power and the potency of the idea. As he says, when a teacher teaches a student, the teacher can never give it over as he has it for himself. Like if it's Kateo Lovat, he gives only a tiny little bit. And the same, the student, when the student is a lesser student, now Yeshua is giving over to the Zekanim, to the elders, he's also not transmitting all that he has. He's lessening it. So you see that the light becomes diminished. From level to level. That's in as much as the light is concerned. Is a less brilliant light. The wattage becomes less. Tzad kelim, but when you're measuring the vessels, harei shabash lamata, the more the influence is coming down below, hu beriboy, then hu beriboy oisios. It becomes far more words. Hu beriboy inyanim. And he translates it like a lot of teacher that gives over. You keep on saying, in other words, you give this example, then you translate it into a different example. You rephrase it into this type of thing. But a very brilliant person doesn't need all those reframing. He gets it in one shot. He gets the essence of the idea, and he himself can apply it on his own to all the various different situations. The deeper you want to understand an idea, the more applications you have, but you don't need to express it in all these applications because you have already the essence of it. So, but a teacher that's teaching to a simpler student has to express it in this idea and in this idea, because maybe the student won't appreciate it so much, doesn't get it so much if you're framing it in this frame of reference. But if you'll put it into a different frame of reference, the student will get it. So the teacher has to try a whole lot of different worlds to present it in this world and in that world. But that's what he says. It's first of all, it's long-winded. There's a lot of words, and it's in many words, many contents, the influencer to himself doesn't need it. It's only for the recipient. And therefore, so the same is also on the higher levels. This is going back to the way it is in heaven. In the divine, and the higher levels are the light is very, very much, very potent. And the vessels are few. In Chachma, there's much less vessels than there is in Bina. Bina is very wordy. And when it's descending further down, it increases the vessels, and the light becomes diminished. Hence, you have higher numbers and lower numbers simultaneously. As you're descending, the numbers increase in terms of vessels, but the numbers decrease in terms of potency. And one is dependent on the other. Where there is few vessels, on the higher levels where the vessels are few, there's an abundance of light. But when the vessels are in a lot, the light becomes diminished. When there is a lot of vessels, means a lot of words, you don't feel the power, the potency of the idea is already taken down. And this is what it says in the future, a great prophecy. What does it say? On the simple level, it's talking about the longevity that's going to be in the future. That people will live very long lives, similar to what we just learning in these two Torah portions, what we started now, Bereshis, the beginning of Genesis. We read about in the first 10 generations who lived close to 1,000 years, right? The longest living person lived to 169, Mr. Shelach. And then followed by, I think it was Redu, who lived, or Yared, who lived 162 years. 962 years. And then you have a whole bunch of others, right? Living all within between 800 and 900. I think the least you have over there is 700 something, except for Chanoch, who lived a very short life, 300 and whatever amount of years, because Hashem took him before his time, as Rashi describes. But generally, that was the lifespan. When Mashiach, however, then it was reduced to about a maximum life of 120 years. Hashem says, that his life will be 120 years, according to one interpretation. That's what it means. That God was dictating decreeing a new lifespan for the human. But when Mashiach comes, the life will go back to being very, very, very long life. So it says that when someone will die at 100 years old, it will be tragic. It was like if a person died in infancy. So that's what the prophet says. In other words, life will go on and on. V'anar, and a youth, ben meir shana, will die when he's 100 years old. So what is the deeper meaning of that? So he's going to explain it. There's the simple meaning, but then there is everything in Torah has multiple layers. So on a deeper layer, it means like this: the nar ubchenes katnus. When you say nar, it's referring to a minor level. When you say, just like in the physical, in age, a minor has a limited understanding of things. Hasn't yet gained great wisdom. When you move through life, you get older, you become smarter. And when you become older, you have the experience of life and you're way smarter. That's why in Hebrew, the word zaken, which means simply zikna, which means aging, also means, which means like a mature person, also comes from the word, also means a wise person. Zeshekana chachma, they say one who acquires wisdom, because life usually teaches you a lot. But children, youth, they have energy and power, but they're lacking in sophistication or in knowledge and experience. So the same also applies to the divine levels. The Malchus and Ze'er Anpin, which are the lower Sefirot, are many times referred to as Na'arim Una'arais. They're considered youth because the lights in the Ze'er Anpin, Ze'er means small. You realize in the temple there was a depiction of two cherubs, and they were in love with each other. One was a boy, one was a girl, and they were supposed to represent the Hakadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah, God and Israel, and the Shekhinah is really the source of Israel, the Jewish souls. Now, they all had baby faces. They were infants. Why were they infants? Because the level of Ze'er Anpin, the level of the divine, as it manifests, it is so contracted, it is so diminished, that it's considered a youth. And the same is also Malchut is the female, and Ze'er Anpin is the male. And therefore, they're also called Nar. Now, since they're Nar, their capacity for divine input is very, very minor. That means that the divine flow that the Ze'er Anpin can hold is very, very little compared to what can be revealed in Chachma and in Bina, which are far more mature levels of the divine, where there's a far more expansive revelation of Ein Sof. And in Keser, which is called Erech Anpin, which means the long face, which is not the opposite of small. Over there, you can't compare. The lights are incredibly expansive. Okay. Now, what the verse is now describing when it says that a youth will Ben Meya Shana will be 100 years old. Yamasi will die, we'll see later. But first, let's understand what does it mean. A youth will be 100 years old. What that means is that when Mashiach will come, the entire system will achieve an upgrade. That means all of the worlds will be elevated. Our world will expand our capability of knowledge and understanding. And what we are able to conceive now and know now is peanuts comparison to what kind of knowledge we're going to have, similar to what you're watching in the modern technology, how the world is beginning to create computing systems that are able to compute on levels that are like unheard of, like unimaginably faster, and that's going to expand human knowledge and human capabilities in an exponential way, a way that we can't even fathom. In a very, very, and it's every day it's happening more and more and more. Just like it is in the physical, the same is also spiritually. Our capacity for godly light will grow and grow and grow. Now, this system is not only in the creation, but it will also affect throughout the entire system, which means that Malchut will rise, and her husband, the Ze'er Anpin, the six emotions, will rise, and they will rise into Keser. Malchus and Ze'er Anpin will rise into Keser. And that's the meaning that the youth will be 100 years old. Because remember we said earlier that 100 is a number of the light when we spoke about Sarah's years. So we said single digits are in the Ze'er Anpin. Double digits is double capacity, is in Chachma and Bina. Triple digits means triple capacity. Over here, triple capacity doesn't mean only 3 times as much. It means way, way, way higher. 3 digits, which means like saying 1,000 watts versus 100 watts, going up to a much higher capacity. And usually that type of light and that type of an illumination shines only in Keser, not in Ze'er Anpin. But when Mashiach will come, the Nar, which means the lower levels of Malchus and Ze'er Anpin, will rise and have the capacity of Keser. And that's what the point over here is. Nar the Nar katnos. Nar represents smallness. Where the light has already been diminished. Yisroel is going to be elevated la'asid in the future into a level of 100, which, and obviously together with that, it will lift the capacity of creation, because Ze'er Anpin and Malchus are the source of time and space. For example, time, for instance, are 6 days The world is created in 6 days, which means the underpinnings of the world are the 6 emotions. When those 6 emotions are going to be informed with Or Ein Sof, they're going to be enlightened with Or Ein Sof. That means that what the Zeir Anpin will produce will be exponentially, impossibly to understand how much greater the capacity is going to open up for all creatures and living beings who live within the world of time and space. Malchus is the source of. All right. Okay. So these are the. This is the Nar is going to rise, and how high will he rise? Now, usually we say like this. There is. Remember we said earlier there's an Eir Anpin called youth. Chachma and Bina. Chachma is called Zaken. Chachma is called a mature. Chachma and Bina are like a father and a mother, but on a mature, an aged father and mother, like a 70-year-old already. Okay, because Zikna, the sages say that when you reach 70, you're already called. You attain the level of Zakin. So Chachma and Bina, that's called the Zakin. But that's only double digits. That means that Chachma and Bina has a double-digit advantage over the Zeir Anpin currently in the system that it is right now. The energies that are flowing in the 6 emotions and the Malchut are reduced to single digits. The energies that are flowing in Chachma and Bina are double that capacity, are double digits. And again, when I say double, probably means more than double. But when you have double digits, it's on a whole. It's like on an earthquake that every digit you go up higher, it's like way greater. Here it's also that. So double digits is way, it's not just twice, it's above that. So the capacity of Chachma and Bina, but that's only 70 years old. 70 is 2 digits. Now we say, but in Mashiach's days, Nar, the Chachma, the single digit Sefirot, which are Malchus and the Zeir Anpin, will surpass what Chachma and Bina look now. And they will go up to the level of 3 digits. Ben Meah, that will go up to the level of Keser. Based on that, he explains another verse that it says, young people will shame the old. What does that mean? When a young person has greater wisdom than the great sage, when a little shmendrik comes along and he's able to outdo the great sage in his sharpness and his Torah knowledge, then the elderly sage gets ashamed, gets kind of embarrassed in front of this young, like someone who you didn't expect. He's like as a child prodigy, he's surpassing like it says about the Alter Rebbe, that when he was 13 years old, he gave a talk on Kiddush HaChodesh, which are one of the most complicated laws in Rambam. And he blew the mind of the greatest sages because they all couldn't keep up with him. It says, they couldn't find their hands and feet. He literally blew them. He blew them out of the park. So this is what it's going to be. That in Mashiach's times, there's going to be such an increase in the lower levels that they're going to surpass the Chachma and Bina. Now, obviously, if they're going to rise, Chachma and Bina will also rise, and the Chachma and Bina will even have a greater capacity. That's also true. But what we mean that it will shame the levels of Chachma and Bina as they were in the past will be shamed in front of the new youth. The new youth will be so much wiser than the old of the past. As he said, Yisroel will rise up to the level of 100, higher than what is now Zikna, elderly, Veseva, and real age. Chodsheichem v'shivim shana, 60 years is called Zikna, and Shivim shana, 70 years already called Seva, which are 2 words for being already coming of age. Like it says, the days of a person's life, 70 years, which means 70 years, you're already maxed out. You've reached already the levels of sagehood. You've leaved already the levels of true maturity. But 100 is lamayla, is higher than the 70, because again, and when we say it's higher, it's not just more. It's incomparably more. That's why it's in a different league. It's 3 digits versus 2 digits. And 100 is higher than that. And this is what Zeshakas is what it also says in the verse. Una Arim and youth, Penezekanim, the face of the old Yalbinu, they will make them go white, meaning they will shame them. When a person gets embarrassed, they get first red and then they get white. So in this case, it means that they will make them the Na'arim Yalamaylam Ezekanim. The youth of the future will be far wiser than the sages of the current time. The Inyanu and the idea is the Hine. Now he's going to explain it a little bit more Kabbalistically. The Hine, for behold, Shivim. Now he's going to explain this idea, but in a very high level. What does it mean? What does it mean 100 years? And what does it mean 70 years? In terms of attaining the light of 70 years versus attaining the light of 100 years. So it explains like this. The lights of 70 years, we were talking till now, it's the light that shines in the Ze'er Anpin and in Malchus, the lights that shine in Chachma and in Bina called 70 years. He's now going to say no, that this is referring to the why 70? Seven always has it. 70 is always the plural, is the tens of 7, right? So the double digiting of 7. So it has to relate to 7. What is the 7? 7 are the 7 emotions. But here we're referring to the 7 emotions of Keser, of the crown. Which the 7 emotions of Keser are very, very, very powerful lights. Keser is Ein Sof. However, the 100 are the first 3 Sfirot of Keser, which are much higher, on a league of their own. The Gimel Rishonais of Keser, the Chabad of Keser, the Chachma bin Adas of Keser, which are incomparably higher than the 7 emotions of Keser. And when he says that the youth are going to attain, they're going to go past the level of Seva, and they're going to go up to the level of Meya, 100 years, which means that the Ze'er Anpin and Malchus are going to facilitate the Gimel Rishonais, the first 3 of Keser, which is a very high level. Then you know the Shivim Shana Zayin Tatan, the Keser, the 7 lower elements of Keser. Or Shivas Hayamim, which is called the light of the 7 days. Umeya and 100 in your Gimel Rishonais the Keser is the idea of the first 3 of Keser, of the crown. And this is the meaning of 100 of this. The youth will be 100. Sheyis'ale will be elevated b'b'chinas Gimel Rishonais the Keser into the first 3 of Keser, which is of the crown, which is like impossibly high. And this is also very beautiful. There's a very cryptic Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the Mishnah goes through. This is in Ethics of the Fathers, in chapter 5, I think. It goes through the age of a person and what a person attains, what we should expect in terms of the growth of a human being when they reach certain milestones, a certain birthday. So it goes through 5 years old, a child should be learning Chumash. When they're should already be able to learn Scripture. 10 years old, they should already have the ability to have the capacity to be able to study Mishnah, which is already a more complicated study. When they're 15 years old, they can learn Talmud. When they're 18 years old, they can get married. All right, it goes on and on and on. Then it says, Ben Abarim, for example, when you're 40 years old, you attain the level of Bina. When you become 50 years old, you can give counsel, Le'etza. Then it says, when you're 70 years old, Zikna, that's age. And it says, what's with 100 years old? Ben Meya, when you reach 100, Ki'ilu Meis, it's as if you died, Ubatal Mina Olam, and you've become nullified and canceled from the world. Well, that seems to be the worst thing you could possibly say to Grandpa when he reaches his 100th birthday. Grandpa, it's officially you're dead now. It's you're in your grave. Why in the world would the Mishnah say such a discouraging statement to tell people who are still alive and hopefully they can still live meaningful lives and share a whole lot? There's nothing like the wisdom of a sage who's 100 years old, if God grants them especially the ability to have their minds with them at that age. So why would we discourage the person and say they're dead? But now he's going to explain that this doesn't mean that they're dead. It means that there's certain lights that are not possible for a person to experience it in this world. Certain levels of divine experience, which are so bright, this world cannot handle it. As long as you're in the world, you can't handle it. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. That when you reached 100 years old, you now open up because of your ability. I mean, a person, obviously, it's not just sitting and aging by just wasting time and allowing the years just to pile up. But when a person toils and does their work and studies and learns and makes something out of their life, so when they reach the ripe old age of 100 years old, they can attain a level that is only possible for someone who left this world, a soul that left this world, such a level of enlightenment, which is the ability to see God himself, which is what he's explaining over here. That's the light that shines in the first three levels of Kesser. That's the pure Ein Sof. It's not possible for a level of world to facilitate that. That's the meaning of when you reach when you reach 100 years old, which 100 is triple digits, it's the level of Pneumius of Kesser, the first three of Kesser, then Ki'ilu Meis, it's as if you died, which means the body and the limitations of the body have been canceled. While you're physically alive in your body, it's as if your body has been canceled and you have the ability to attain extraterrestrial or outer body types of divine revelation. As he says, when you're 100 as if you died and you're already canceled from the world. The Mefarshim ask, this Mishnah tells us all the qualities of a person. The person is ascending from level to level. And what would be the quality? We say as if the person already died. The idea is, this is the meaning of Misas and Reuven. This that a person can see. It says, there's a verse that says, a person cannot see me and be alive, which means that while we're alive in bodies, we cannot see God. We cannot see God. So what do the sages derive from here? That we don't see God as long as we're alive in the physical incarnation. But the moment the soul leaves the body, then we can see Hashem, whatever that means. And now he's saying that kind of vision one can have when they reach 100. The Niksiv, it says in the verse, a person cannot see me and be alive. When they're alive, they can't see, but in their death, they could see. And what that means is, seeing. That means understanding you can have even through your physical brain. But seeing, which means seeing the substance of the divine. The atzmus, the Ein Sof, and the essence of the Ein Sof. On this it says, a person cannot see me and be alive. But in death, you could see. And this is the meaning, that when a person reaches their 100th birthday, Mazel Tov, they then have the ability now to start being able to seeing the divine. That in their death they can see. And this is what it says regarding certain people, certain great tzaddikim, that it says, your world you will see during your lifetime. What does that mean? What is your world? Your world over here means your ultimate world. The world that usually people only receive in the afterlife, you'll be able to receive it during your lifetime. You can see it during your life. Since you've hit 100 years old, the person was elevated into the inner dimension of Kesser. And therefore, on that level, you can see. But you can only achieve such a high, lofty level by first going through the 70 years, which is the 70 years of purification. But let's leave this last and final thought for tomorrow, and we'll conclude this chapter 34, and we'll go on Be'ezras Hashem in chapter 35. And again, welcome back to everyone. I hope this time we'll have the endurance, and we'll do all these wonderful classes daily. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here today.